Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to Better Humans. Today I have the pleasure and honor of interviewing one of my favorite people to not just hang out with, but also to just kind of like scroll Facebook and boom, there he is every single day in, day out, getting my update and feed from none other than Gary Lamb. Gary, what's going on, man? How are you doing today?
Oh man, it's been a great day. Excited to be on here. Hurt that it's taken so long for you to finally bring me on here. So I've been pouting a little bit, but now I'm happy.
Don't worry, I'm sure you've got plenty of other things to do than lick your wounds, but don't worry about it. So I know that you just wrapped up a 2025 event season. I'm sure you're ready to kick back and relax for, I don't know, 24 hours. What do you have planned during this holiday season and this, quote unquote rest period for you?
The holiday season's actually super busy for us. So we just wrapped up last Sunday. This is a Wednesday that we're recording this. Our last Christmas event of the year. I do events for a living, and that was our fifth Christmas event. But we go right into. I also pastor a church called Action Church, and so our huge rocking Christmas Eve service is Christmas Eve. So this is a new location for us. We lost our building in the last year, and we're a portable church now. So we're doing it out in our community. It's the first time we've ever done it outside. It's the first time we've ever done it community wide. So for the next
Wow.
7 days, we will go into mode for that, setting it up, tearing it down. It's basically another event. And then I also found out today, I can't make really talk about this too much. I can talk about it a little bit, but we've got our next location. So it's another portable location, but it will allow us to triple in size. And so we're running right now at the church I pastor. We meet in a small town and at the brewery, and we're operating at about 115% capacity right now. When I say we're literally standing room only, we're literally standing room only. People standing out on the sidewalks watching the service through open doors.
That's incredible. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, and I think it'll be helpful for people so that they know what it looks like when the rug gets pulled out from under them. But can you tell me a little bit about like why did you have to? Where were you at, and like what was the old reality of Action Church, and then where'd you end up moving to, and why there, and pop open the hood
Yeah.
on that experience.
Uh, I started Action about 14 years ago. It's the third church that I've started. Um, we, I'm sure we'll get into this later, the reasons why I was no longer pastoring my previous church. I took about a year and a half off, had a group of people want me to start another church. And so my deal with them was we had to move to the poorest part of town and we just had to serve people. And so at the previous 14 years, we had met in the neighboring city to where we are now. I'm in Ball Ground, Georgia, about 45 minutes north of Atlanta. The town right below us is Canton. And so
Hmm.
we were in the poorer part of that town. We had an old grocery store, 32,000 square feet, that we operated out of, ran the only warming shelter in the county, a very large food pantry, very large clothing ministry, uh, opened our building up for the community clinic every Monday, ran there giving free health care, AA and NA meetings almost every night of the week. And then I ran events out of that building. About a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, the city bought our property for some expansion that is going to be happening in the city. And we didn't really know when that was going to transpire. And we got a certified letter in the mail saying we had 10 weeks to be out of our building. So the last Sunday, it is now December 17th, the last Sunday in September, we had to be out of the building. We looked everywhere. Like I said, we had 10 weeks to find a building. That was not an option. We were not going to find anything. Through a bunch of other things over the last year and a half, 2 years, God had kind of relocated me and relocated my heart to the town north of us called Ball Ground. And kind of in a last ditch effort, I reached out to the local brewery there and asked them, could we hold services in their brewery on Sunday morning? And without hesitation, they said yes. And so the first Sunday in October, so October, November, so we're about 10 weeks in now to hosting services in the brewery. And we'll probably be there about another month and a half. It looks like we'll move to our new portable location the first Sunday in February if everything works out. It'll still be in Ball Ground. It's about 2 blocks from where we currently meet. Um, the building we're in right now holds It doesn't legally hold about 300, but we have a little over 300 people in there. The building
Well, I
we're
was gonna
moving to,
say like this the size difference here. I mean, like because I've been up to that brewery and what
yeah,
is it like 2,000 square feet? Like
yeah, we
maybe
went from
2,500.
30 we went from 32,000 square feet to the building's 3,100 square feet. We have access to about 2,600 square feet of it. We actually
Yeah,
bought an old school bus and converted it for our kids. It has air conditioned units in it, large screen TVs, hardwood floors in it, and we do our kids ministry in this school bus behind the building. So that's been a unique challenge for us, but we've exploded in growth since then. God is blessed. It's been a fun ride.
yeah,
Ball ground. I mean, you're very familiar with the area. Is an up and coming town. It's growing. Young families, meaning 45 and under, I would call say, is moving there, and not a lot. I mean, it sounds weird to say there's not a lot in regards to church because I mean the next town over, Jasper, Canton, has all kinds of churches, but actually in our community, as people are moving there, it was just the right time for us to move there, and it is kind of connected
yeah.
with the community very well.
I think so too. I mean, I can think of like two buildings there, and I don't. I mean, God uses people in different ways, but I never really saw much of a church presence
Right.
happening in ball ground. And now, I mean, you guys are blowing the doors wide open, worship music, people worshiping in the streets.
Yeah,
You know,
it's kind of full. It's kind of full sale for me. So I have been in this area for 21 years. I moved here when I was 28. I'm 49. Yeah, so 21 years now. I moved here 21 years ago to start a church. But here's the funny story. I was pastoring a church that I had started in Iowa. I was from Georgia. I had moved to Iowa to start a church. I knew God was calling me back home to Georgia to start a church, and I didn't know where. And I was flipping through the channels 21 years ago, and there was a TBN, Sky Angel, I don't know what it was. It was a station with 24-hour preaching on it. And I remember flipping through the channels, and there was a guy preaching, and he had this massive tree hanging from the ceiling. And you could see the bottom of the tree, and he was preaching a sermon. I still remember it 23 years later, or 22 years later, and he was talking about bitter root, bitter fruit, and talking about how the importance of your root in the trees. And it went
yeah,
off the air, and it said his name was Lance Johnson, World Harvest Church, Ball Ground, Georgia. And I was like, where is Ball Ground, Georgia at? And I began to look at Ball Ground, and that's how I discovered Canton. And at that time, Canton was one of the fastest growing cities in Georgia.
yeah,
God began to lay it on my heart. That's how so seeing a church in Ball Ground is what led me to being in Canton. That church is no longer around. But it's funny. There's a smaller church that uses their facilities now, and I pull into that parking lot every morning, and I ask God to give us that building. And I think it would just be the ultimate 360 from the church that I saw on television preaching to now that's the building that the church I pastor meets in. But in God's timing, it'll work out, or it won't work out. We'll
yeah.
see. I don't want anything to happen to the church that's there. Um, but
Oh yeah, for sure.
I pray for that building on a daily because I just think it would be a great 360 to my story.
Yeah, man. Well, there's two main things that I want to talk with you about today. Obviously, a main part is pastoring, and
Yeah,
I've got a handful of questions for you about that. The latter is promoting, and like we might get into promoting, we might not. It depends on like how
right.
how deep we go with pastoring, with faith,
Yeah, that'd
with
be awesome.
identity, things like that. Um, Before we get into it, though, I just want to let everyone know who's tuning in. This is Better Humans. This is a show where we talk about all the ways that we're going out, reaching out, impacting others, whether it's big or small scale. Um, we believe that entrepreneurship is the best way to better ourselves, and businesses or churches, right, are how we reach out and help others. So, in this mutual benefit, it's a must. Transformation, I believe the transformation is key to unlocking it all. So, Gary, let's get into it. So, pastoring, you kind of tapped into this, but was that story about the tree roots? Is that essentially like how you got into pastoring? Because
No,
you mentioned you grew a church in Iowa. So, like, how did it all technically really start? Um, and with that, like, did you, is it something that you tripped and fell into, or you knew that you were going to pursue this? Like, did you do seminary? Like, how did it all start for you?
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't grow up in church. My parents became believers during my teenage years, and it never was really part of my life. I got out of high school. I was pretty hell on wheels. And I always like to say, like every great story for a man, it starts with a girl. And so I met a girl, and she invited me to
Yeah.
church. And if you're in other parts of the country, you probably don't have a lot of these churches around. But here in Georgia, we have a lot. They're called independent fundamental Baptist churches. Very very strict, very hardcore.
Yup.
Um, and so that's the type of church this girl went to, and it's the church she had grown up in. And I went to this little bitty country church on a Sunday night, and this little 5'7" Cherokee Indian preacher hit the stage, and I'll never forget. He began to scream and holler and tell me I was going to fry like bacon if I didn't know Christ. And man, it radically, as crazy as that sounds, it radically changed my life. He gave an altar call. I went down. I accepted Christ as my Savior, and I was radically changed. I knew instantly that God had changed me, and I knew instantly that I wanted to live for God. And so as I began to go to that church and watch him, I kind of, we call it, felt God called me to preach. And I knew
Mhm.
that's what I wanted to do in my life. I went to Bible college. Believe it or not, I actually have a doctorate degree in pastoral theology. I don't really brag about that. I don't talk about it a lot. No one would believe it. It's actually in probably a packed up box at my house. I could give two flips about it. But I went to college. The pastor that I was telling you about got leukemia. And so during that time,
Yeah.
me and a couple of the other associate pastors filled in for him during that time. I built a pretty large college ministry while I was at his church. I'm 20 years old at this time. I'm very young. He comes back. I felt like
Can I
God
can
was.
I can I dig on that really quick?
Mhm.
You, as a 20-year-old, were building a college ministry?
Yeah, the college ministry was bigger than the church, actually. And
Okay, and
so,
so is that something that like you that like through the church you were given authority over to
yeah, so
grow,
if
or
you
it's
grew
like
up
it
in a
just
more, yeah, if you understand more traditional church back in the day, a lot of churches had what was called Sunday school.
yeah.
And so I had this, I was the college and career Sunday school teacher, I guess you would call it. And that Sunday school class just began to grow crazy. Um, there was a small community college around there, and a lot of the kids started coming. And that movement, it was a lot older people. They weren't used to somebody young on fire, and it became a
Yeah.
draw for all of the college kids. And so I had that college ministry. And so as I began to look at going to do my own church, the pastor I was under was very big in starting churches. He used to always say it's easier to give birth than it is to raise the dead. And he said, why would you go take over an established church where you have to fight, kick, and scream? And so, and he had a real heart for the Midwest. And he said, why don't you look towards the Midwest? We'll support you as you go start a church. And Ames starts with an A. So it was the first time I looked at Ames, Iowa, was the home of Iowa State University. And I don't know if you remember, you're way younger than me, Jimmy. So there used to be these little bulletin boards, little online bulletin boards where you would get
Yeah.
information from. And
Hmm.
believe it or not, I came across Ames, Iowa, and I found a group of 20 people in Ames, Iowa who wanted to start a church, wanted to start an independent Baptist church. And so I picked up my wife at the time, and I had a daughter at the time. And no, that's a lie. I didn't have a daughter at the time. My daughter was born in Ames. So we moved to Iowa, and we started a church. And it grew, believe it or not, this crazy independent, strict Baptist church. Um, we had a television ministry, Vision in the Heartland with Gary Lamb. It was horrible. Uh, and but I didn't know much about church. I was going to Bible college at the time. I was pastoring these
Yeah.
people. The church was growing. Um, about 2.5 years in, I went on my first vacation, and my wife and I went to the beach. And I always tell this story. The first night there, I got sicker than I'd ever been in my life. I got food poisoning. I was so sick I couldn't get out of bed. Physically couldn't get out of the bed. And I remember looking at my wife at the time, and I said, I don't want to ruin your vacation. When we came into town, we passed a Christian bookstore. I said, would you just go up there, grab me a book? You go out and enjoy the beach, and I'll lay here in bed and just read and sleep and try to recover. And she just went and grabbed a book, came back with the book, and the book was called The Purpose Driven Church by Rick Warren. And it was all about this guy in California who had started a church for unchurched people and how he had done it. I thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever heard of. It connected with me, someone not growing up in church. And I was also ignorant. So I went back to my church in Iowa and said, hey, here's what we're doing. We're dropping the name Baptist and we're doing this. And our church went from about 300 to 30 people in about a month. Everybody
Yeah.
left. And, if I would have slowed down a little bit, you know this about me, Jimmy, I don't operate very slow. Had I slowed down a little bit, I would have got to the point where Rick talks about don't read this and immediately go implement this in your church. You've got to do it slowly. And I didn't get to that point. And so I kind of rebuilt that church. It was called Heartland Baptist Church. I rebuilt it as Heartland Church, got it up to a couple of hundred people, which was a very big deal in Iowa because, I mean,
Yeah.
non denominationalism was not a big thing then, especially all those years ago. Um, I kind of realized I didn't know what I was doing. The church had got to a certain size. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't think I could take it any further. I was 27 years old at the time. And I came across a church somehow through a friend of a friend. I met a pastor who was pastoring a church of about 5,000 people meeting in a high school gym in Paulding County. And I called this guy and I said, hey, you don't know me. I'm fixing to relocate I said, I pastor a church in Iowa, but I'm fixing to resign the church, move there and get a full-time job and go to your church. And I just want to learn from you for a year. And I came down and met with the guy. Long story short, he looked at me and said, hey, we want to start churches. And so why don't you actually come on our staff for a year and learn everything you can from us, and then we'll send you out to start a church. And during that time, so while I was in Iowa, I saw the TV show that I was telling you about the guy with the tree on the
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah. With the roots and all that. Yeah.
And so when I moved back to Paulding County, I said, hey, I want to go to this town called Canton, and I want to start a church after my year's up. And so I did. And so I was on staff there, and I moved up here, and I started a church called Ridgestone Church because you named everything sounded like subdivisions back then. And
Right.
I started this church called Ridgestone. It did not fit my personality, the name, or what we were doing. And it exploded with growth. At our 1 year anniversary, we announced that we changed the name and we started calling it Revolution Church. And I was there for 4 years. It became, this matter of fact, right before I lost the church, and I'll get into how I lost it if you care to go down that road. It was named the 16th fastest growing church in America. We were meeting in a movie theater, running thousands of people, doing 3 services every Sunday. And I was there for 5 years, so from 28 till I was 33. And I like to say my talent at that time in my life far exceeded my character. So I had an affair. I lost the church, lost my marriage, lost my family. I lost everything. Went from pastoring the biggest church in the community to being on the front page of the paper to literally being homeless. I was homeless. I slept 2 nights in my Jeep Cherokee and had nowhere to go. A family in the church allowed me to move into their basement, and I began to work. And I started a roofing company at that time. I went to work for a roofing company, realized how crooked it was, realized that I didn't need anything to hurt my reputation anymore, and that
Yeah.
that
Right.
I could do what this guy was doing, and I could do it with integrity. And so I went and started a roofing company, and I
Right.
did that for about a year and a half. And during that time, I had people want me to start another church, and the church I was at the time, I could be wrong. I actually think you attend that church now, or you've attended that church.
Yeah.
So at the time, hadn't found a pastor yet, and so I kind of laid out some stipulations. I said we're not starting a church until they find a pastor. I said because it's been almost a year and a half now. A lot of people were getting restless, and if I started a church, they would leave that church now and come with me. And I said, that's not how I want to start a church. I said, we have to move to the poorest part of town and serve people. And I said, I'm never taking a salary. I said, I'm never going to allow anyone to say I started this church because I needed money. And so so they found a pastor. I had a great career running this roofing company, and and then I was driving through the poorest part of town one day and found the building that we met in, and I rented it. And I didn't know anything. I'd never had a church that had a building. So my church in Iowa didn't have a building; it was portable. And so I thought you
Huh.
just unlocked the doors and started having church in there. And the leadership at my previous church called the city on us and told them that we were meeting in the building illegally. So the city threw us out, and we met in the parking lot for 6 months until I figured out that you had to get building permits and could get the building done the right way. So for 6 months, we met in the parking lot in the poorest part of town, and it was unique and it was interesting and it was funny. I always say for 6 months it never rained one Sunday. The first Sunday in our building, it poured rain. God held off the rain. And
Ah,
so I've been at Action
love
Church
that.
for 14 years now, but now it's like a new church plant. I mean, we're back portable again. We're in a different city now. And so, in some ways, Action Church is 10 weeks old. It's almost like we launched a new church with just a very large core group of people.
Huh. Okay. There's so many cool little tidbits in there. But I think the main thing that I want to ask is almost like not a definition really, but like what the word pastor.
Yeah.
Having gone through all of the things that you've experienced and getting to where you are now, what does the word pastor mean to you?
Mm. I mean, it means different things for different things. So for me, it's the greatest honor in the world. It's something that I lost. It's something that I didn't think I would ever do again. It's something that mentors to me told me I had lost the right to pastor and would never do again. So for me, it's a great honor that I pastor again. The call of God's irrevocable, and God's not surprised by our mess ups and our screw ups. The Bible's full of people that screwed up and effed up. And matter of fact, the entire book's full of effed up people that God uses. So for me, it's a great honor to be a pastor. For what it means to me in regards to other people, it's someone who's just going to. I think they have to lead a church. I think the pastor is the head of a local church. So I think so many times we call somebody a pastor and they're not a pastor. So if they don't have a church, it's kind of like calling someone a football player, but they don't got a football team. So to me, a pastor is a very distinct calling. You can be a preacher, you can be a man in ministry, but a pastor leads a church. It leads a local church. So, but it leads a local church for people that are out there. Then to the community, kind of contradicting what I just said about leading a local church. I've had a lot of people tell me, though I don't pastor the biggest church in town, that I'm the community pastor. And I see that. I deal with a lot of people who, when their life is falling apart, they're they're not going to the local denominational church. They're coming to me to talk to me. When it was very telling to me, I remember right after I lost my previous church and I wasn't even ministry, a young girl shot herself and killed herself at the high school. And I was who the high school called. And I remember the principal calling me, and they're like, "We need you to come in and talk to the students." And I said, "Man, I don't even pastor a church anymore." And he said, "No, you're the community's pastor. You need to come here and help us with these kids." And so I did that, and God worked awesome in that. So it means a lot of different things depending on the angle. For me, it's an honor. For me, it means I lead a local church. I think that is what it means. But I think to a lot of people in this community who don't do church and don't go to church, if you asked them who their pastor was, they would say Gary Lamb is their pastor.
That's crazy. Not in a bad way. Just I crazy in a cool way.
Yeah,
Like how cool is that? That
yeah,
man.
yeah.
And
It's not
it
a
reminds
title.
me of the times when people who aren't religious, they have no faith, but in crisis, they turn to God.
Yeah,
It's like, man, in crisis, it's like who is the individual I can turn to, lean on, you know, confide in. It's so it's really telling that
yeah.
like it's
Well,
not the giant building, the it's not all the polished um Christians
yeah.
and
No,
leader
that's
Christian
North American.
leadership.
Yeah, that's North American Christianity. That's what we've done. Where we've turned in. I don't know that you want to go down this road with me, Jimmy, because it's an issue I'm pretty passionate about. But that's where we've turned the North American church into a business, and so it's rinse and repeat and look like me and do like me and have the big screen and have the big bands
Yeah.
and have the great production. And I'm going to preach the same sermon that everyone else is preaching. And here's the systems and the steps. And I'm not saying God's not in that, but what I'm saying is you don't need God in it to grow it. If you're a charismatic leader, you're a good leader. Just like with a business, you can grow it. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
it's kind of
it's
a
not that I
hobby issue for
don't
me.
it's not that I don't want to go into it. Actually, it might be pretty reflective of the next question, even though there's a bit of a different angle on it. But, a lot of times, you know, we got a bit of your backstory here, and like a lot of times your personality really shines through. And like, I don't have any beef with it. I'm cool with it.
Mm-hmm.
But like in person and online, sometimes your personality really shines through. And so, how do you think that that weighs against what people would traditionally think that a pastor speaks and behaves like,
Yeah.
or
So
the vision in their mind of
yeah.
what that person does?
Yeah, I think we have unrealistic expectations of pastors. The last, I've been in full time ministry since I was 21 and 49. So the last 28 years, I have been around pastors. In my previous life, I used to preach every Sunday, get on a plane and travel the country and speak at conferences. So I could sit here and name the who's who of mega church pastors, and I've run with them, and I was in those circles. And so, pastors are some of the fakest effing people in the world. And so, because they're afraid to lose their job, they're afraid of what people will think to them. So they feel like they have to act a
Yeah.
certain way, they have to talk a certain way, they have to communicate a certain way, they have to put on a certain front because they can't walk in the freedom of who Christ made them for fear of losing their job. And I think that's why we have so many pastors imploding, so many pastors falling into sin. The expectations and the standards that you set for yourself are just unreasonable. And
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people ask me, they said, I feel like you almost imploded intentionally all those years ago. And I don't think I made a conscious decision to implode. But I remember when I got caught having an affair and it was exposed and I knew I had lost a church, it was like this 10,000 pound weight off my chest. I remember I could breathe. I could finally be me.
Yeah.
And and I'm me. And the thing is, I've been with a lot of these pastors, and they're just like me at the dinner table. They're just like me in private. And I'm just not living my life that way. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with what they're doing, but they're going to say a cuss word here and there. They're going to have a drink. Their marriage has problems. They
Yep.
struggle with the same issues, pornography and insecurities that everyone else does. But when they get on that stage, they've got to put a front on. And I think it's disingenuous. And I think it's why we have such a push away from the church because people can't relate to what's on the stage. I always say you might not like me on Sunday, but you're not going to like me Monday through Saturday because I'm the same person all the time. I'm wildly in love with Jesus and I'm me. I have a foul mouth. I say what is on my thoughts. I, I'm that way on the stage on Sunday, but I'm going to point you to Jesus because I'm crazy about Jesus. And the Bible says when the Son of Man's lifted up, he'll draw all men into him. So when, me acting a certain way or me being prim and proper or classifying what you think a pastor should look like isn't lifting up Jesus. Because when your world falls apart, Jimmy, and you're embarrassed about whatever it is you've done, you're going to come find me because you know there's going to be no judgment. There's going to be no looking down upon. And I don't mean you literally, but I mean you
No,
being
I
a person
understand. Yeah. Yeah.
instead of going to your pastor who you're afraid is going to judge you, shun you, because the church is the worst. Christians are the worst about shooting their own. Someone falls into sin, we don't lift them up, man. We kick them to the curb. That's what happened to me, and I'm not bitter about it. I'm not upset about it. I get it, but
Yeah.
the restoration process is super flawed.
A version of that has also happened to me.
Yeah,
A version of that.
yeah,
Not like a extradition or wait,
right.
what is that's the right word, right? Extradition
An
or
excommunication, right,
excommunication. Yeah. Not like that. Not like a please don't come back. You're not welcome here
right,
anymore kind of thing. But
right.
yeah, a version of that has happened to me too. But
I always say there's no difference in the unchurched and the church. The difference is the church hides it. I always, I was thinking about running for mayor just because I thought it'd be fun to run for mayor. And everybody's like, "What about the skeletons in your closet?" And I said, "I don't have any skeletons in my closet. All of my skeletons are on the front porch." And so, do you know how freeing that is to walk in? This is who I am. I answer to one person, God, and it's not prideful. It's not arrogant. I used to be really arrogant, Jimmy, and say, I answer to one person, meaning don't question me on anything. I answer to God. You don't have the right to question me. Now I walk in a spirit of, man, I answer to God. And I pray about it and I have counsel around me and I have some wise men around me who aren't just like me. You've met them, Doc Ferris. I have a guy, one of my
mhm.
elders, David Westrick. They're godly men that are totally opposite of me, but they know how I am. And I make sure I run everything through the lens of the Bible and the lens of them. And if they feel like me, I'm going to be me until me being me is sinful. And I don't want to be sinful in my actions. but I'm going to be me. And I think it connects with a lot of people. And I've led a lot of people to Jesus over the years. I've had the honor of pointing a lot of people to Jesus by being real and being approachable and feeling like I always like to say, I want people to look up on that stage and say, if God can use that idiot, he can use me. And it's a God thing.
I've heard similar phrasing like that before, and sometimes I have like an issue where I have to like verbally and manually tell myself like not that complicated. Stop
Right.
overthinking it. It's really simple. Go help. Go do. Go go pastor, go minister, like go just tell them. Just be like, Jesus, what are we doing here? Like let's do something. Um on that note, actually, I'm kind of curious. Can you tell me about for you, can you tell me about prayer and kind of what prayer looks like for you and how prayer really impacts your life?
Yeah. So for the longest time, prayer was probably the weakest part of my faith because I believed in prayer and I understood the importance of prayer, but I had because what we do with everything, I had turned prayer into this religious ritual, thinking that I had to stop every day at a certain time and pray or get up in the morning and be on my knees or go to my prayer closet. And the Bible says to pray without ceasing. And so prayer to me is communication with God, just like we're communicating now. So
Hmm.
I'm in a continuous state of prayer. I'm always praying. I was on my way to a meeting today and praying. I prayed about this podcast today. I prayed about I I, I also want to be me without being offensive to where I'm at. So, like for your podcast, God help me to watch my language on the show today. Help me to. Jimmy's not as controversial as me, and I don't mean that in a mean way towards you, but I want to be respectful and honor your position.
That
I'm
makes
in your
sense.
house today. You're not on my podcast. I'm on your podcast, and so I'm in a continuous state of prayer. Sometimes it's me arguing with God. Sometimes I fight with God. Sometimes I cuss God out. They don't get very far with that. Sometimes I'm thanking God. So to me, I try to very much my prayer life look like my regular life. It's me and God communicating nonstop and making sure, um, even as recently as 2 years ago, I
Yeah.
almost imploded my life, and I had to get real about my personal time with God. And I've learned as my personal worship time goes, my intake of the Bible, not in a ritualistic way, my intake of prayer, my intake of even listening to worship music and surrounding myself with godly people as my personal worship time goes, everything else in my life flows out. I wrote a post today about it's the first time that I don't have crazy goals for 2026. I don't have all these goals. For the first time ever, it's just like I'm content, I'm happy, and I want to spend 2026 resting and working on me because I'm riding a wave right now with God in the church and I'm enjoying it. And
Yeah.
I'm starting some new things professionally this year, but they're not even my focus. My focus is making sure I'm healthy because as I'm healthy, everything else I get to operate in the overflow, man. When you get to operate in the overflow, that's when it's happening. When my sermons are not coming from a study time, they're coming from the overflow of my personal time. When my time with you right now is coming and I'm just spitting out stuff that's coming from the overflow of my quiet time with God instead of some scripted thing. I didn't send you a thing saying, hey, what are we going to talk about? Do you have questions? I didn't want to be prepared ahead of time. I just want to operate so deep in the spirit of God that the overflow comes out and hopefully it brings glory to Him.
Yeah, I'm, just knowing you, I don't want I don't want scripted Gary. Like that,
Right.
I'm not here for scripted Gary. Does such a Gary even exist? Like I've never seen you.
No. Yeah,
Actually, we
I
we
can
did
play
some
the
videos
game.
that one time. We did
Yeah.
some videos that one time, and I was like, "Here's your script, loosely. Good luck.
Yeah.
Try to stick
Yeah.
to it."
I can play the game. I've had situations where I've had to be in large business meetings and I had to be with city officials and I've had to be in
Yeah.
council meetings and at the table with multimillionaires. So I've had situations where, um, hold on one second. Sorry. Um, I've been in situations where I had to play the game. I'm still going to be me, but again, I'm going to be respectful to someone else's house. I don't go
Yeah.
into a city council meeting dropping f bombs. You come into my house, I'm dropping f bombs, but I'm not going into the city council meeting dropping f bombs. You know what? I'm not coming onto
Yeah.
your podcast cussing every other word. You and me've had coffee, and I'm cussing every other word. That's who I am. But I'm going to be respectful of your house and play the game.
Yeah. So so with prayer, what does hearing from God look like for you?
I don't know. I've always been real careful with that phrasing. So probably two times in my life have I used the phrase, this is God's will. I used the phrase that it was God's will when I moved to Canton, Georgia. I knew that I knew that I knew it was God's will. I don't even know that I used this phrase when we moved to ball ground, but I felt it. It was God's will to move to ball ground. Um, what did that look like in my life? It looked like a sense of peace. It looked like a sense of confirmation. It looked like a sense of the counsel around me was pointing in that direction. It looked like a sense to me that doors were opening in that direction. But I'm much more likely to say, man, I feel God's leading us this way. Because here's the deal, Jimmy, you come to me and you tell me, hey, Gary, I want to talk to you about starting such and such business. Okay. And you come to me and tell me, hey, I believe it's God's will that I go start this business. Then my question is, why are you coming to talk to me about it? If you think it's God's will, you need to go do it. It doesn't matter what I think. I might think it's the most stupid idea in the world, but you just told me it was God's will. I ain't arguing with God's will. So I've always been hesitant. When I talked about moving to the brewery, I said, hey, it seems like this is the door God's opening. That at least leaves it to open to counsel. But hearing from God to me comes from counsel. It comes from confirmation. It comes from just my countenance of knowing I have peace about this situation and things lining up. God is not speaking to me in an audible voice saying, Gary, here's what I need you to do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's tell-alls, you know.
Yeah. So for you, it's in your walk, in your actions, you're looking and you do it for long enough to where it's like you start to spot the pattern or pick out the pattern of like this isn't coincidence. This isn't someone's free will or decision
Right.
making. This is like God set this up. God set this up. Okay, then that means God
Yeah.
will be here and he's setting this up and you're expectant
Yeah.
of God what he's going to do next.
Yeah.
Mm,
When is this
Yeah,
podcast going to air?
whenever you want it to.
Well, the only reason I was asking because it goes on this next story. So, and maybe I'll share this next story if we ever do this podcast again. But our next location that we're moving into, if I told you the God story behind this location becoming available, it would blow your mind. Now, but even with all the stuff, I'm not going to look at you and be like, it's God's will. I'm going to look at you and be like, sure does seem like God opened up a door for this to happen. And God had to move a lot of stuff for this to happen because this building was not an option 3 months ago. And it was my first preference. And all the way down to cities owning certain buildings and having to sell off city buildings to the county, who I have a great relationship with the county, and the county immediately called and said, hey, would you? It's an amazing story. So, God, as you're moving and you're walking, I think you know this, as your growth is right in your faith, I, you didn't come to me and really talk much about the career decision you made recently. And I don't know how much of you've shared that on your podcast, but
Yeah, yeah, no, I talk about it pretty openly. Yeah.
okay. So you just knew, and the doors begin to open, and the stars begin to align, and a lot of people pray for God to open a door, and I don't really pray that way. I always pray, God, I'm walking through this door, and we're both going to look real freaking stupid if it doesn't work out. So I need you to shut the door. I never pray for God to open the door because I'm going. Boom, I'm going all the way in. I pray for God to shut doors. God, I'm moving. Boom, this building's
Yeah.
available. I am full tilt, balls to the wall, trying to get this building. If you don't want it to happen, shut the door. Because in my mind, God open up doors takes activity out of my hands. I want to be moving forward. I always, what's the old saying? pray like everything depends on God, work like everything depends on you. And so I'm always moving forward. If I'm asking God to open a door, I don't feel the urgency to press forward. If I'm asking God to shut a door, I feel the urgency to keep going, keep going, keep going, keep hammering, keep making the phone calls until God finally shuts the door. I don't know if that's biblical, but I don't think it's unbiblical.
Thing is, my I'm brought to like James, not by faith alone, but by work and by deeds.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
People think that's in reference to salvation. It's in reference for a walk. You know, the more I engage in living out my faith, the more my faith grows. You know,
yeah.
I get asked all the time the stupid question. I deal with lots of unchurched people. You got to go to church to be a Christian? Absolutely not. You don't have to go to church to be a Christian. But you're never going to grow as a Christ follower if you're not part of church. The Bible says not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. Again, it goes back to the cheesy analogy I used earlier. You can say you're a football player all day long. You might be a football player, but you ain't getting to play football if you ain't on a football team. And so I think we've
So tell me why you believe that is. Not like I'm not arguing, against you, but I'm somebody who, just my wife and I, you talk about the churchgoers versus the unchurched goers, and I I don't know if I like self-identify as like unchurched, but I have a really, really hard time every Sunday waving, saying hi, how's your week, how's work, like with the same
yeah.
people, singing, roughly the same worship songs every
Mm-hmm.
Sunday, not really
Yeah,
doing
because
much
you're
to
not
test or grow my faith. Like,
right, because you're not being challenged by the watered down message wherever you're going. The same hook and most men are not challenged by the church they go to. Church is geared towards women, and so most men go out of duty. They go to get laid from their wife. They go to make their wife happy. They go to fulfill their religious obligation. They go to network. I can't tell you how many men I know that are in sales that listen to my sermons every Sunday but go to another church because like, oh man, the networking, man, you know how many cars I've sold because I go to that church, and but then they'll tell me they're not growing. Well, no, you're not growing. You're putting your priorities in the wrong place. You're not going to church to, you know, it doesn't make
I
sense.
was given an alternative word for that recently about another church that you and I are near,
Yeah,
and it was well, we go here because like all the perks and benefits of being a part of the community. I was
right.
like, that can you take 4 steps back really quick so we can just address that, like, you went to a church network to be a part of the
Yeah.
community,
Well,
like,
yeah, and we're guilty of that. We go to a church because it has a great kids ministry, and I mean, I think kids ministry is great. Don't get me wrong. At our church, it's probably our weak link at this time. And it's something we know we have to improve. But here's my deal. If all the people who said, man, I can't tell you how many people tell me they go to some larger churches in the area and they're like, I don't even really enjoy it, but my kids love it and they have a great kids ministry. Right. Why don't you find a church you love where you like the preaching, you feel connected, and why don't you be part of making that kids ministry great? And but there's very few entrepreneurs around there, and so we don't think
yeah.
about taking our entrepreneur spirit and carrying it over into a church. I have a family in Ball Ground, and when I tell you I adore this family, I love this family, and they will end up at Action Church one day, but it's not time yet because they're not ready to sacrifice all the bells and whistles. And but if they came to Action Church, we'd have a lot of the bells and whistles. They would be able to plug in and take our kids level area to the next level. They would take our nursery to the next level. And but God hasn't, and I haven't even discussed it with them because I don't want to be. I'm a good enough salesman. I can convince them of that. I want God to work in their heart in that regard. And but we tend to go to church and think, man, what's is it? The old Kennedy saying, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." We do
Yeah.
that with church. We go
Yep.
to church based on what do we get out of this church instead of holy shit, this church is impacting the community. That pastor just kicked me between the balls, and dude, I'm ready to charge hell right now. We can help the kids area be better. We can help the greeters be better. We can take this church to the next level. But especially in a church plant situation like what we are, you need entrepreneurs to come along and be like, I'm not here for what it is. but I'm here for what I see, what it can be. And I
Yeah.
buy into you as the pastor. I buy into the vision of this church. I buy into the fact that it's impacting this community. And I want to be part of, instead of sitting on my blessed assurance every Sunday and coming to a church where I leave at 11 o'clock sharp and leave at 12 o'clock dull. I want to come and get there at 6 o'clock in the morning once a month and help set the thing up, go home and get my wife, take them to the Waffle House, show up and sit in a brewery and be part of a pastor who just convicted me as a man to, to have some balls and be a better husband and be a better father and go back out and make that church what it was. My previous church, it grew like it did because people bought into it at that level. And most men, they're not challenged. Most churches geared towards women. They don't want to come and sing love songs to Jesus. Men don't. They don't want to be greeters and shake people's hand. And they want to go to a church where Jesus was a badass. Like there's no way around that. Jesus was a bad dude, man. I mean, not bad, sinful, bad as in like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
tough dude, man. And yet we've made Jesus this limp wristed, purple sash, permed hair, riding the donkey side saddle like he's a chick, and we've emasculated Christ, and that's not the Christ I see. I see Jesus coming back riding a white horse with King of Kings and Lord of Lords tattooed down his legs. He was a bad dude, and he was made to shape culture. This is not how I expected
Mm.
this podcast to go.
Um, it's so funny. You keep answering the next question that I have for you. So it is going exactly how I intended it to go.
Perfect.
I wanted to ask you, who is Jesus to you? Now, earlier you said you're wildly in love with him. I mean,
Yeah.
I would assume that you have an opinion of him. You think certain things about him. Um, I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to process a little bit in my own head the vision, the vision that you have of who Jesus is, and the vision that I have of who Jesus is, and I have this weird feeling on my end that like I'm like, is it is it reducing is it reducing Jesus at all to say that he's, you know, Jesus is bad, Jesus is badass, Jesus is masculine, he's like the epitome of masculinity. He's got, you know, this tattoos, identity, like this, like he is like the man, right? Like
Yeah.
I feel like that's a sliver of him.
That's a
Like when I
sliver
think
of
of
him. He was
Jesus,
all those. So here's the deal. You just said it. Our Baroque definition of what masculinity is. Jesus was all those things you just mentioned. He was also a guy that was so tender that kids flocked to him. He was a person that was so loving that sinners who were considered outcasts in those days and times felt comfortable around him. He was so attentive that in the midst of preaching to huge crowds, could sense that they were hungry, could sense that someone needed healing. He was willing to be interrupted as he's teaching and someone cuts a hole in the roof and drops down their friend in front of him. So again, you can't. So we have this, all those things that I said he is. But he says also, he goes, Moses said, who do I say has sent me? And he said, I am has sent you. I am who I am. Jesus is whoever you need him to be when you need him to be that. And so, well, I think the epitome of masculinity is a badass dude that can defend his family and is willing to fight for his family, but also is so tender. His wife knows she can come curl up next to him at night. His kids know they can crawl into his lap, and he's going to make time for them. So, when we go to one extreme, it doesn't make the other extreme. Jesus is all those
yeah,
things.
okay, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, yeah. That's where I was trying to weigh in my. I was like, because I'm glad you took it to like Ehyeh, Yahweh, like all of that. Like
Yeah.
that's who I like. I when I've been given vision of Jesus knelt over a creek, and as his hand brushes through the water, the stones are painted into existence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's an artist. I always say that God's the ultimate artist. He took nothing and made everything.
Like that,
He's a
like
creative.
when I think of Jesus, I think of ultimate
Yeah,
authority.
he's everything. So when you ask what he is to me, he's my everything. And
Mhm.
so, and my place of being homeless, he's my provider. And my place of my marriage falling apart, even in my current marriage, years ago, he was the restorer. For
Mhm.
right now in my soul, where I am at, I am in a, and I don't mean like physical, but I'm in a warpath mode. I'm in a get out of my way, we're about to win ball ground to Jesus mode, and he's my rebel king. So when you're going through various stages in your life, he's what you need when you need him to be that.
Mhm.
So ask me 3 months from now who Jesus is to me. And the dominant factor in my life at that time might not be the badass tattoo Jesus, because I might be in a different place, and that's not the Jesus I need at that moment.
Yeah. He's
Damn,
been.
Jimmy, that's good preaching, son. We should do a
Yeah.
whole teaching series on that. The Rebel King, we should call it, and teach on Jesus.
Do it, dude. So good. So, well, I mean, did I call it or did I not? Right? Like, we've been going for just under an hour, and man, I wanted to talk to you about promoting because there's this whole. If I could split Gary down the middle, not that you're not equal parts on both sides, but I could put pastoring and I could put promoting with the same level of fire and intensity on the other side
I
as
think for a
well.
long time, to be honest with you, that for a long time, I probably did a disservice to Action Church because I tried to keep those two personalities so distinctly different. If you were to go back to my social media even 6 months ago, I never talked about the church. I
Hmm.
felt like in my past, turning the church into a business or promoting a church is what led to my downfall. I'm in a different place in life now. I'm in a healthy place. And I see the urgency. I see the urgency of what our society is becoming. I see the urgency of my city needing Jesus. And so I'm learning to embrace the promoter aspect, because that's my gifting, into my church life. And I,
Yeah, I
and I
mean,
got to
this
make
is
sure I don't
exactly
do that in the flesh.
right. Right. But I mean, this is exactly why I was asking you, why I stopped you and asked about, your days where you were leading the college ministry and how
Yeah.
it grew and how it was the large, like in all the
Yeah, it was
different
on big
sects of
events.
the
I grew
church.
I grew revolution on big events. It's funny. I built that. We did an Easter egg drop. It's still, people talk about it to this day.
I
And
remember that.
we dropped 75,000 eggs from a helicopter. We were one of the first churches in America to do it, and literally 18,000 people showed up at Bowling Park in Canton. 575 north and south was backed up 4 and 5 miles. Riots broke out. A man had a heart attack and died at the Easter egg hunt. It was insanity. The city of Canton was going to arrest me for inciting a riot the night before Easter. I had George H. Bush's lawyer from Texas call the city of Canton and be like, "You're not arresting my client until after the Easter services. He will turn himself in." And it was insane because I was very connected to some big churches at that time. And so I
Jeez.
built that through doing big events. I mean, it was 52 weeks a year. We showed up at the movie theater and put on a festival in a movie theater. That's what we did.
Yeah. Man. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's do this because I know we're about at time here.
Yeah.
I do want to let people know that when it comes to events and promoting, like Gary's the real deal, and I've seen it firsthand. I attend just every other event that he puts on, and is always it's just it's like this Midas touch thing where it's not like it's not gold per se, but uh it's like whenever Gary promotes, the people come.
Yeah.
This is the
I
easiest way to
appreciate
put
that.
it.
And I'd love to talk about that. So maybe we do this again one day and we talk about promoting.
Yeah, because I have questions about like what happened in like the last 5 years or so? Because COVID rocked everyone's shit. Like
Hmm.
it doesn't matter
Yeah.
who you were. Like it changed everything for
I was in the
everybody. It was
event
just
business. I went from knowing literally the day Governor Kemp shut down Georgia, starting that weekend, I had 6 events in a row that, now remember, that was probably going to put 6 figures in my pocket. That was going to get me through the rest of the year. And I lost every one of those events. And I went to, I can tell you, I learned, I tell people I'm not a business person. I'm not really a pastor. I'm a hustler. And I learned how to, I made more money during COVID hustling That's a whole nother podcast for a day.
That's exactly, yeah. So that's exactly it because like, man, there's, and plus people need to know because like, COVID is this own its own special unique beast, and it's not. A rug pull happens big or small. Um,
Hmm.
the Bitcoin,
Our church
AI,
grew during
like,
that time. We were the only church in Cherokee County that didn't shut down. I told them to come arrest us. We weren't going to stop meeting, and we grew during that time. So,
yeah. I mean, if no, that's mean. If there's no other option, then I guess you got to go see. Just
yep,
kidding.
you can watch your preacher
Um,
on TV, or you can go to a preacher that has some testicles and isn't going to quit because the government tells them to. That's how I look at it.
there you go. I can't think of a better way to shift gears here. All right. So, Gary, I appreciate the honesty and transparency. I know that I wouldn't get any other version of you. People are going to come tune in, listen to this, and get to know, a better version of you, or at least, get a deeper level of understanding and intimacy with you. And so, I'm excited for them. I know that you're 100% genuine guy. You really care about helping others. You really, really care about God. I know your life is pointed at Him, and so I appreciate you coming on. If someone tuned in, made it all the way to the end, and they wanted to get connected with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'm pretty active on Instagram. I'm pretty active on Facebook. That would definitely be the two best parts to be able to get in touch with me instantly. Um,
I can go
I
link
mean,
it, but like, for anyone listening, is just search for Gary Lamb, Lamb.
yeah, if you Google Gary Lamb, it takes you to those. I don't even remember what my I don't know if I'm facebook.com/ Pastor Gary Lamb or if I'm just Gary Lamb. I know on Instagram I'm Gary Lamb. You're not going to have any problem finding me. Trust me.
Man dumped 75,000 eggs from a helicopter and arrested
That's
him hard
right.
to, like, so there's the article right there, right? So
Exactly. Google that story. It's out there too. So,
so cool. All right, well, this is amazing, man. Thanks so much. Our next episode we do together, I'm gonna open up the lid on promoting, and
I'd love to talk
we're
about
gonna
that.
talk
I mean,
about the
that's,
secret sauce and all that. So
yeah, I would
it's gonna
love
be
that,
good.
man. Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone.